All right, the pernicious advance of NATO towards Moscow continues unabated. Today we're talking about World War III. Let's get right to it. We all got better things to do. Romania is starting to assemble a network of bomb shelters and bunkers on the Danube near where a drone inadvertently fell, which was directed for a port in Ukraine, inadvertently fell on the Romanian side of the border. We're talking about a Russian missile now. So here's what happened. Russian missile targeting a Ukrainian port where Russia suspects that NATO is trying to smuggle weapons across. Okay? It accidentally lands 200 meters in to Romanian territory. Romania initially denies that this happened, even though there was clear photographic evidence that it happened. Maybe they got the call from old Sleepy Joe who said, hey, we better capitalize on this because we know the war is coming to us eventually. So let's use this as an opportunity to fortify our defenses, to put our missile defense on a higher state of alert, and draw up evacuation plans for the region, which is exactly what they're doing right now. So they're starting to assemble a network of bomb shelters in this region. The mayor of one of the affected regions is also calling on the government to call for an evacuation of villages that are right across from one of these ports that was targeted. They're worried that this is going to happen again. But what is really going on here, okay? Because right now Ukraine is calling on Romania and NATO, and we got some other stuff happen in the Black Sea today that nobody is talking about, which is completely wild, all right? So here's what's probably going to happen. Ukraine is calling on Romania and NATO to utilize their missile defense to take out and neutralize the incoming Russian missiles that are in that ambiguous territory of the borderlands, where there's plausible deniability. Oh, we didn't know if it was going to come over our border like it did last time type thing. So what happens when Romania and NATO start shooting down Russian missiles that are intended for their targets inside Ukraine, effectively putting NATO at war with Russia? We already know they're at war with Russia, but de facto, or de jure, I should say, state of war with Russia. How does Russia respond? Well, immediately the tension ratchets up right away, more than it already is, in a strategic sense. That means nuclear missiles on a higher state of alert. Anytime you have a conventional interaction between, or an engagement between NATO and Russia, because the chain of events is so short from that point to nuclear Armageddon, you know immediately nuclear forces are put on a higher state of combat alert, and that red line lights up like a Christmas tree, I should say. So what is going to happen is I can foresee a situation where they're getting all the pieces where they need them. Because right now, the Ukrainians are making an advance in the southern direction. I'm sorry, guys. I got a lot of stuff to talk about today. I'm trying to paint the picture for you here of what I see. Ukraine is making an advance in the southern direction. No matter what the Russia bros say, they are continuing to chip away against those defensive lines. Russia will be left with no choice but to continue to target those supply chains that are bringing the weapons in from NATO, and they have to nip it in the bud. You have to get it at the port, because once it leaves the port and it goes into Ukraine, then it's everywhere, right? So the best way to do it is to target the ports, and that puts you very, very close to attacking NATO countries themselves. And so the more Ukraine advances, the greater the likelihood that there's going to be an accident on the border, the greater the likelihood that these missiles are going to be shot down by NATO countries. Remember, plausible deniability. We thought it was coming over here. Well, are the Russians going to accept that explanation? And now, just today, this is completely staggering to me, because the UK is saying that it is going to escort Ukrainian grain shipments. Okay, now understand, we just had a grain corridor deal fall through that Turkey was trying to facilitate, that at once Russia and Ukraine agreed to allow that grain to flow into Turkey, I believe, mostly, or maybe in some ports in Romania as well. But they were allowing that so that they could keep the global food prices down, okay? Not that they really care, because right now Zelensky is trying to take legal action against the EU because they won't accept his grain. So this whole thing makes no frickin' sense on its face anyways. So you know what this is about. This is about like bringing UK fighter jets, Typhoon fighter jets, close to the front. This is World War III. That's what this is. But they're masquerading it as this, oh, we got to protect these civilian grain ships. So that's what's going on today. That was the official announcement today, that the RAF, the Royal Air Force, is going to be providing cover for these grain ships. Now, why this is important, you might think, well, why doesn't Russia just let the grain flow and, let these guys access the ports? Well, the Russians are thinking that this is where a lot of military equipment is coming in. This is where things are going in. This is where things are going out. That was the whole thing, is that they were using these humanitarian corridors to bring in weapons. And that's why the plan started falling through in the first place. Okay, that's why the whole thing fell apart. Too many attacks on the Black Sea Fleet, in Crimea, the Kerch Bridge, the whole 9 yards. So really what we have happening here, this whole grain thing, we start to see that it's going to come down to the supply lines, to the nexus of the supply lines right at the border regions. Because if Ukraine can't get weapons in, it can't continue the fight, no matter how much we're willing to give to it. And if Russia starts targeting those supply lines where they originate, then NATO could potentially be forced to do something crazy, like push the Russians a little bit too far by starting to shoot down the missiles that are falling on Ukraine. Now, I totally sympathize with it. I mean, it's silly how you can argue that, hey, we were just trying to bomb this place and you intercepted our ability to do that. It sounds crazy. But that's the situation we have right now. And the U.S. today confirmed, unofficially, of course, but everything they say unofficially is official in 2 months, ATACMS are coming to Ukraine. The Biden administration is likely to send Ukraine long-range Army tactical missile systems, 190 miles. They already have their own drone systems. They already have the Storm Shadow missiles. They have the French medium-range missile. They're getting the Taurus missile right away. So, I mean, it doesn't really even matter anymore, but they're going to be able to utilize these in conjunction with the HIMARS system, which they've been using quite effectively. And if they continue to get this stuff in, Russia's left with no other choice. Because from the Russian perspective, and keep this in mind at all times, I'm showing you some sludge content in the back because I know a lot of people have TikTok brain. These are tanks that are en route towards the region opposite the province that's opposite the Taiwan Strait. So, China's getting ready for war with the United States. What else is new? But what was I talking about? These ATACMS. What the hell was I talking about? I totally lost my train of thought. Too much stuff in thine brain. Anyways, yeah, I'm sure it'll come back to me. But that's the situation going on there, okay? So everybody's getting desperate, it would appear, because Ukraine is now mobilizing women. They're saying that anybody who has medical or pharmaceutical degrees, I'm not sure if that means fully fledged doctor or if you're an intern or if you're in the program or whatever, but they're not letting them leave. They're now going to be required for military service. Some estimates, wild estimates, are saying 400 to 500,000 casualties so far. I suspect that those numbers are grossly exaggerated. For starters, imagine the medical system overwhelm that we would be seeing and hearing about in Ukraine. We're not hearing about that at all. Probably because they're trying to, hide the numbers. But I'm sure it's happening. But I don't think it's that crazy. But they're most certainly running out of people. They are trying to extradite men who were draft dodgers early in the conflict. Hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian diaspora in and around the European region who left before the martial law hammer came down on people and wouldn't let them leave and sent them to the front lines against their will. Well, they're trying to bring those guys back. They're bringing the women back. So I still think this is anybody's ball game. We just don't know what is going on. It appears as though the Ukrainians are making an advance in and around the Robotno region. Very slow advance, but an advance nonetheless. The fact that they're advancing at all is surprising when, if you only listen to the Russia bros who said that Ukraine's been out of this fight for the last 18 months. I'm trying to figure things out, which is why I'm neither a Russia bro or a NATO bro. And when you don't have all the information in the fog of war, if you are decisively in one direction or the other, you run the risk of succumbing to misinformation, which is why I don't take sides at all in this conflict yet. Of course, I'm over here. Ultimately, I'm on this side. If people are coming into the country, I'm going to fight them off with the rest of you guys. But if we really want to understand what's going on, you catch my drift. And of course, this is now causing domestic problems here, which we're going to talk about in just a minute. Russia is claiming that Ukraine is getting ready to blow up the Turkish pipelines. Now, this is interesting. This is something we've talked about for some time. But remember, before Nord Stream, there was Nord Stream, right? Before Nord Stream blew up, you had Germany and Russia. There was always that possibility that they could reconcile their issues. There was that incentive for them to reconcile their issues. What have you had happen recently? Erdogan went to Sochi to meet with Vladimir Putin. Didn't turn out the way they wanted. However, on the gas hub front, of course, Turkey wants to be the gas hub. Turkey wants to be everybody's best friend, right? And unfortunately, one of these days they're going to have to choose, because there's going to be Black Sea NATO exercises happening very soon. And this whole thing with the RAF providing cover to the grain corridor is just completely insane to me. There's no way Turkey can avoid getting involved in this conflict in that capacity either. So we'll see. Russia is now saying that they caught wind of some intelligence that Ukraine is planning on targeting Turk Stream. So if the goal now is to Nord Stream the relationship between Turkey and Russia, is to take out and sever that one final incentive that they have to work together and basically make Turkey an offer they can't refuse. Because there's a very good chance that the only reason why shit hasn't flared up in the Black Sea yet is because Turkey has been there as the middleman between... Turkey's been there all along as the middleman. Of course, they tried to broker a peace deal at the start of the war. They almost did it. Boris Johnson went to Kiev and he said, nope, we're going to give you all the weapons you need. You can fight this thing. And here we are 18 months later. So shit's going to go down in the Black Sea. It's looking like that is where shit is going to hit the fan, because the Russians are going to have to inspect these grain ships. I mean, but think about the lunacy of this. They're talking about not accepting Ukrainian grain because it's going to mess with the prices and all this stuff. These are the people who want you to think that they actually care if people starve in the world, that they actually cared about the geriatric population, and that's why they effectively crashed the entire economy for 3 years. No. There's always ulterior motives. This is just an excuse to get warplanes, NATO warplanes, in the Black Sea on a permanent basis. And this is a footnote in the news today. But this is huge, because NATO is effectively saying we are going to enforce the grain corridor. It's insane to me, man. We got Abrams tanks en route, 31 Abrams tanks armed with depleted uranium, probably already in Ukraine, getting ready to engage Russia. But that, to me, is not even surprising, because, I mean, I thought when we had Leopard tanks fighting Russian tanks, which was a replay of World War II, I thought that would be it. I mean, that was it. But the goalpost keeps getting moved. And that's great that the threshold for nuclear Armageddon is much higher than we thought it was initially. But eventually, you reach a fait accompli where you get to a certain point of no return where, you know, it's almost like it's better if it happens sooner than later, right? It's better if we had a limited nuclear strike somewhere now to just put the brakes on this whole thing, because we keep going, we keep pushing, and both sides get more and more desperate. And then when the button is finally pushed, the likelihood of it going from 0 to 100 quickly increases drastically. We have Ukraine flaunting their new 800-kilometer Drones that have an 800-kilometer range. They're saying, of course, they're going to use these to target Moscow. If you didn't know, Moscow is being attacked on a daily basis. In fact, a military headquarters in southern Russia in Rostov-on-Don, one of the places where they coordinate most of what happens in Ukraine, was attacked. It was a direct hit, apparently. So the Ukrainians got real lucky on that one. We got fires at all types of different military facilities. It's become so commonplace that you don't even hear about it anymore. Okay, all you hear about is more and more missile defense moving in the direction of Moscow and St. Petersburg. So, man, I mean, this is it. We're in World War III. There is no doubt about it whatsoever. Drones are intercepted on a daily basis. Now you have Estonia considering doing a trade embargo against Russia. Understand, it's all a front. The grain corridor, Ukraine proxy, just remember what this is at all times. If something isn't making sense, this is a war between the East and the West. And whoever's in the borderlands, whatever sort of excuses they're making and all this stuff, it's because they're not ready yet. The only reason why Romania didn't immediately invoke Article 4 or call for the invocation of Article 4 was because they weren't ready yet. When NATO is ready, they won't need an excuse. Okay, when NATO wants to join the war, they won't have to wait for a missile to fly. They'll just talk up this story in the legacy media. They'll say, maybe the Ukrainian electronic warfare will cause a drone. They'll be able to control it. I don't know how it works. They'll cause one of these drones to veer off course, and that will be NATO's license to enter the conflict. You have Poland, the country with the worst economy in the EU, buying the most weapons. I mean, 4% of their GDP committed to weapons. It does not take a brainiac to figure out what is going on there. Russia allegedly is starting to withdraw some of its forces from Belarus. Now, we might think, great, that means that things are starting to quiet down, or is it because all the tactical nuclear weapons is set up and they have the deterrence there so they don't need the troops? They're repurposing the troops to other regions. We know there's shit going on in Finland that I got to talk about as well. But Russia is still pressed for manpower. Okay, just to take over a country like Ukraine, it's estimated you need 3 million troops to hold that place down, just that one place. And right now, they're looking at somewhere between 1.5 to 2 million troops when their next round of mobilization is complete come fall. So they need to be able to hold down Ukraine, and they probably are bringing those forces out of Belarus because they don't see an immediate threat there right now. A conventional threat. Of course, just keep in mind at all times too that if anybody crosses those borders, it's now de jure World War III. That's it. It's official World War III. So it's nukes. So is it just a waste to have conventional forces in that region if you know it's getting nukey right when a Polish military contingent or the other way around, a Belarusian crosses the border, right? So anyways, man, why do I even talk about this shit anymore? Anyways, okay, I got a lot of other stuff to talk about, but before that, our NutriStore deal that I spontaneously made the other day, we pretty much were cleaned out. We have a little bit more in stock, not much. I think we have about, I don't even know how much exactly, but we were pretty much cleared out. We still do have some of each variety. And the reason why I was able to have that sale, NutriStore 15 is the coupon code, 15% off, is because I'm getting a deal from the wholesaler. And so I'm passing those deals on to people because hard times are ahead, okay? Also, my friend Steve over at Freeze Dry Wholesale, he's the company who used to only deal with the military. They provided meals for the DOD. Now they actually sell to civilians as well. So this is like the 5-star cuisine that the captains eat on the nuclear submarines, okay? This is the stuff, this is freeze-dried, lasts 25 years, and it's full portions. So NutriStore, which is an A+ brand, I mean, top quality stuff. And there's not a lot of companies that are of the quality of these two companies right here. These guys, very high quality company. This guy who runs this company, salt of the earth type guy. I'm telling you guys, this is a real patriot who runs this country right here. He makes high quality stuff, probably like 100 different varieties. You can get whole pork chops, steaks, the whole 9 yards. Anyways, he has let me know that they are going to be raising their prices soon. I said, could you hold off on that for a week or so that we could give people an opportunity to stock up before the next bump of 10, 15%, whatever it is, comes? And he said, okay, I can hold off. And he said this without hesitation because, you know, we're good friends. And we're going to be bringing him back on the channel again just to talk about the nature of the industry and what's going on and, you know, which elites are buying what type of food. Obviously, can't disclose specific names, but I assure you guys, people are loading up their pantries with this kind of stuff because, as I've always said, this is money, okay? This right here, next to gold, which is the only real form of money, this is a barterable commodity in the dystopian future that awaits. So you can use coupon code Canadian Prepper to get 15% off wholesale freeze-dried. And I'll post a link in the description, or 15% off NutriStore for another, I think I said 48 hours, and that was about 40 hours ago. So I will extend it until tomorrow at noon for CanadianPreparedness.com, and that coupon code is NutriStore15. The prices on this stuff are going to be going up next week. I probably will be able to get him to extend it a little bit, but you know, he's already given people as good of a deal as he can give them. And it's great stuff. We're going to be doing more videos showcasing some of the stuff. They got lobster, sirloin steaks, pulled pork, everything. All right. So anyways, stock up while you can, while the getting is good. The economy is shit right now. That's all I can say. It's complete and utter shit. I don't know how people are surviving. People are going to start revolting very, very soon. All right. Where should we go here on the map? There's an ongoing cyber war that's happening behind the scenes. And the Russians are saying that this could lead to nuclear Armageddon. Because understand, when you have a cyber war, this is what precipitates potentially targeting strategic forces of whatever country's involved. So even if you do an attack on the grid, you might think you're doing some 5D chess or 4D chess or whatever. You're taking out the power grid via cyber attack. It's not a nuclear threat to a country, but it is because it prevents or prohibits that country potentially from being able to activate their strategic forces and do a retaliatory strike were they the subject of a first strike from the opposing country. So let's say, you know, the United States used one of their cyber weapons, crippled part of Russia's power grid, which was connected to its strategic forces. Russia, the likelihood of them doing a first strike at that point, because their ability to respond is now limited. Of course, they have the dead hand system there anyway, so if everything shuts down, they just launch it all anyways, right? Because if Russia can't exist, then the world can't. That whole mantra, right? But this is one of the possible ways in which you could see nuclear war not stem just from a direct nuclear threat or even the threat of conventional war, but you could have the cause of it be a cyber attack. You could have the cause of it be a biowarfare attack. Nuclear deterrence is to prevent a country, to basically safeguard a country against being strategically defeated. So ultimately, there's many ways you can strategically defeat a country. You can do it economically, you can do it through cyber, which is, as we talked about, intimately connected with their ability to deploy their strategic forces, or you can even do it through biowarfare. If we were to release a bioweapon onto Russia, would they nuke us? Because they knew that that was an existential threat, a strategic threat, meant their strategic defeat. Anyways, they're warning about an all-out war over cyber clashes. So this is just more stuff happening behind the scenes that we don't even hear about. We want to halt further deterioration A Russian spokesperson said, a mistake in the use of ICTs, cyber weapons, may lead to a direct conflict and all-out war, especially as that the White House is aware, this is bad translation, that Russia has all the necessary capabilities to defend itself. A devastating computer attack against our critical information infrastructure will not be left without a response. So you might say, well, they'll just do a tit for tat. They'll just do a cyber attack on us. But again, what if we in some way impact their ability to launch their nuclear weapons? They may just launch them first because they're expecting an attack, because in the run-up to a first strike, you would try to disable your opponent's ability to strike back. So anyways, it's a complicated conversation. I should probably bring somebody on with a strategic military background who can speak to this whole potential state of affairs with more authority. As I talked about the other day, World War III has already begun, and you know, I usually don't agree with the Ukrainian intelligence chief, but I will say that he's right about this, is that if somebody thinks that the conflict in Ukraine is about setting the scores between Kiev and Moscow, it's a mistake. And obviously it is. And that's why you're going to have British jets engaging the Russians in the Black Sea, and nobody's talking about it. That's insane. Finland doing an inventory of its bomb shelters, 50,000 of them. 50,000 bomb shelters. Finland's preparing for nuclear war. But, this is a big but. It's a big old but. New member Finland may take part in NATO's nuclear planning. This was back in April, but you can bet that this is the whole reason why Finland is becoming a part of NATO anyways, and this is why it's such a big concern for the Russians. Because if they do put nuclear weapons in Finland, that means St. Petersburg gone in a few seconds, in a minute or two, if they utilize tactical nuclear weapons launched from Finland. And according to rumor, this is just rumor, you always have to fact check and go and do your own research when you read anything on Twitter, because Twitter is just a bastion for disinformation and bullshit, to be brutally honest. But this individual tends to be mostly right about some things, and I'm guessing because we understand this is World War III, that he's probably not too far off the mark here. I can't pronounce his name. Laddie71 says the USA and NATO will deploy tactical nuclear weapons carriers 150 kilometers from the Russian borders. And before I forget, apparently all the American aircraft carriers are currently back home in the United States right now. I don't know if that means something. I don't know if it's out of the ordinary. If you guys know anything about that, let me know in the description. I think there's only one that is outside of port right now. You might think, well, that's a good thing. That means American interventionism is, you know, going through a slow phase right now. Maybe, or maybe they need those things back home because, you know, they're worried about shit hitting the fan and they're going to need them for logistical purposes. Anyways, there's just so many things lining up. I can't even begin to, I wish I could just, hey, you know, take my brain, put it in your head for a second, and then I won't have to do these videos. Someday in the future, Elon Musk is likely going to make it mandatory, because by the way things are going, he's going to run the world soon. Anyways, under new agreements between the United States and Finland, American aviation will begin to use the infrastructure of the Rovaniemi airport in Lapland, which is located less than 150 kilometers from Russian border. 150K with a missile, you're covering that in no time. There's probably ways that the United States and NATO could deploy nuclear weapons in the same amount of time to the primary Russian targets, but that's getting very, very close. The Russians have a lot of stuff going on way up in the north, in the Arctic. So is it just going to create a balance of power? Is it going to create an imbalance? It's hard to say. Particular attention is drawn to the fact that in the near future, an American military contingent will be stationed at the Finnish airport, blah, 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 with F-35s, which of course can deploy nuclear weapons. And we already know the nukes are, the United States has nukes in many different countries, including Turkey. And that's going to be interesting to see how that ultimately plays out, if they're going to have to remove those. But I think we're going to see, going back to this issue with the Turk Stream, if NATO is successful in its plans, because you know there's nothing more they would like than to sever the Turk Stream or the Blue Stream pipeline, because that means that Turkey will have zero incentive to negotiate with the Russians from that point forward. So it's looking very likely that somebody is going to instigate some shit in the Black Sea right away. But the U.S. has nuclear weapons all over, okay? And it's not like these other little incremental advances are going to immediately turn the tables and cause the Russians to do something rash. But it all adds up. Where I think we're going to see the big interaction, the first real big engagement, is if Ukraine can continue to make progress in this direction, then Russia will have no choice but to target closer and closer to those ports, those places where the stuff is coming in. And in doing so, they run the risk of accidentally hitting NATO countries, and we all know what happens next. Now, a lot of the Russia bros are saying, oh, the advance is so small, and there's all these memes showing how little of a slice of the pie that Ukraine has taken back. If we zoom out here, you can see that it's almost a negligible in terms of the size of the land. But these same people, all along when the Russians were fighting in Bakhmut, they were saying, oh, it's not about land. You know, it's about attritional rates, right? It's about if you're waging a long war like this, how can you wage the war on a better budget? Okay, so if the Russians are firing $1 million missiles and the Ukrainians are using $50,000 drones, NATO can fight that fight a lot longer than the Russians can. So while the Ukrainians may not be making a lot of progress here, we don't know what's going on in the front lines. We don't know who's getting ground up. We can assume that it's probably the Ukrainians because the Russian artillery is quite overwhelming, we're led to believe. But if the Ukrainians are making advances at a better attritional rate, at a lower attritional rate than the Russians can keep pace with it in spite of the defenses, which they are very formidable, then there is a possibility that the situation, that we could see a collapse along these front lines at some point, and it will take the form likely of a Russian pullback. A Russian, what do they call it? A strategic retreat or something like that. There's some euphemistic term that they utilize. Anyways, crazy stuff is going on. What else do we got to talk about here? Worst performing economy, Poland, investing the most in weapons. Where are they getting the money to buy these weapons? Who is confident in Poland's ability to pay this stuff back, especially if the Russians win? Clearly, they're setting up Poland to be the next line of defense, okay? So every day I hear we're buying another 100 HIMARS and 50 F-35. They're just shopping. It's like they got a teenager with a credit card or something. And these, they're dealing with inflation. They have this huge swell of refugees that I'm presuming are not all contributing to the economy of the society. It's probably disproportionately women who have children who can't work all the jobs that, a more even demographic could. So, on other war fronts, Niger, now there's talk right now. U.S. could begin withdrawing troops from Niger in coming weeks, U.S. officials say. So one of two things has happened here. Either the Nigerians, not Nigerians, I don't know how you pronounce Nigerians, possibly struck a deal with the French to get a better rate on the uranium, because that's all this is about. It's only about resources. There's nothing to do with humanitarianism. That's just the smokescreen bullshit. We've already talked about that. Either this is just a ruse and they're just repositioning, because I'm hearing different headlines. I'm hearing withdrawing. I'm hearing reassorting forces. I'm hearing shifting forces inside Niger. So are they just repositioning themselves in an attempt to make a move? Or are they really jumping ship? They struck a deal with this new government. Maybe they gave them an offer they couldn't refuse. You just never know. So I guess time will tell with that one. We may well avert a war in Africa, but I don't think for too long, because so long as you have East-West fighting with one another and they have military superiority, you're going to have proxy wars flaring up everywhere else in the world, okay? Where else should we go here today? We talked about the cyber warfare stuff. I think I did this issue justice, but just in case I didn't, they're mulling evacuation of a border town. NATO member state Romania is weighing evacuating its border town Plaru days after authorities acknowledged for the first time that debris from a suspected Russian drone fell on its territory. So we may well see that. Romania is also going to create a network of bomb shelters and an air threat warning system to protect the population from Russian attacks. That's called mission creep, guys. They're going to get closer and closer to the line. ATACMS are coming. 800-kilometer drones are going to be headed to Moscow very soon. Women's conscription, the whole 9 yards. What's going on in North Korea today? Well, the North Koreans, they just keep finding these extra resources kicking around. They just keep finding this stuff. A country whose GDP hasn't grown at all in 20 years and whose people are on the brink of starvation suddenly miraculously has 16-axle mobile ICBM launcher systems, new tactical nuclear weapons on submarines, the whole 9 yards, and everybody looks surprisingly happier and more plump than a few years ago. And that's probably because China has stepped up its aid to North Korea. They're clearly trying to create a bit of a bulwark against the encroachment of South Korea and the new NATO alliance that emerges there between Japan and South Korea and possibly Taiwan and the United States. So I'm starting to suspect that how this is working, it's very likely that the Chinese and the the Chinese are supporting Russia in a lot of ways as well. But North Korea is kind of this conduit from which China can provide North Korea with support. And now North Korea, Kim Jong-un is going to Russia. It's on. I mean, they are fully fledged allies now, North Korea and Russia. North Korea is going to start sending artillery and artillery shells and probably a bunch of other things to Russia. What they got in return is unknown. We know that Russia has pulled back some of their missile defense in the Kuril Islands around Japan. Did they make some sort of deal like, okay, you guys are going to have our back, you scratch our back, we scratch yours type thing? So, North Korea this stuff is not just manifesting out of thin air. They are under so many sanctions, they can't really build this stuff themselves. I mean, they could if it was an open free market that they had access to. They would be as advanced, if not more advanced, than South Korea. Unfortunately right now, or fortunately for us, I should say, because these people are unfortunately very brainwashed. Fortunately, they have been somewhat contained, but that's looking like that time is over. And Kim Jong-un is enjoying being China's pit bull here and being on the front for the Chinese, who are fully supporting them, and as they are going to reroute that support towards Russia. Everybody's saying, oh, is it going to work, and yada, yada, yada. It doesn't matter. They've amassed such a large nuclear arsenal now that it's very likely that the Americans aren't going to screw with them, because if they do, it's going to get nuclear. Look at this guy crying here. It's almost like it's the opposite of the hour of hate. If you ever seen 1984, it's 2 minutes of hate or whatever it is. What else do we got going on here? We got, that's just more North Korean stuff. This is a fire at a Russian customs office. This is a daily occurrence now. We have these tanks that are being shipped to I can't remember, I think it's Fajun. What is it called again? I can't remember, I'll butcher it. It's the province that's right across the Taiwan Strait. They've been preparing things militarily there for some time. We got some floods happening right now. I believe this is Hong Kong. 6.2 inches of rain in 1 hour today. Now in Greece, many of you know, there was 2 years worth of rain in some spots in one day that fell, and this is after they had the biggest wildfire in Europe's history there. So things are just getting crazy all over the planet. You got the Texas power grid nearly crashing again the other day. Depending on the weather this winter, we could see that happen again. We have a cyclone in Brazil, which apparently was quite abnormal, and record flooding in Europe, killing 25 people. Fires continue to burn in Canada on a regular, and it looks as though we're going to see another heat wave up here. And this is right in the region where the fires are burning, okay, where we get in temperatures 10 to 20 degrees above normal, and that's Celsius, okay? So that's leading to all kinds of chaos. We have this hurricane, which may hit, it's looking as though it's going to hit the Maritimes. At what strength? It's probably just going to be a tropical storm at this point, but the trajectory, the projections here are that that's where it's going to be heading. That it's going to make a turn towards the north, and then it's going to smash right into the Atlantic. So if you live on the Atlantic, you better get prepared. Sydney, St. John, both St. John's, Newfoundland, and St. John, Corner Brook, all those places up there in the Maritimes, you are going to get hit. It's very likely we're going to see some flooding up in and around there. I've never been near a hurricane, never been in a hurricane. I live here in the flatlands, so we deal with smoke out here pretty much. What else do we got to talk about today? I think that's about it. Weather-wise, there was a few other issues with respect to, okay, so, if you guys didn't know, this is the new Super Bowl ad right here. I wonder how much McDonald's paid them to get Anthony Blinken and this guy, his counterpart, to eat McDonald's French fries. How much did they pay them for that? Because that's good advertising right there. You can't beat that kind of advertising where the media starts talking about. That's how they popularize all the social media platforms that they don't want you to go on, is they talk about it in the media. I remember when Facebook was blowing up, they were talking to every single news agency, this new Facebook thing is on the rise, and everybody, that's because they want everybody to join it. Get everybody locked into it. All right. Let's see here. What was I going to talk about? Okay, so Biden said no to Alaska oil. This is a Twitter post I made, which sums this up. I'm going to play the devil's advocate here, because Alaska, the oil in the ground has about enough oil to last the United States in its entirety for a couple years, 2 to 4 years at best, is if they can get all the oil. And when they quote the oil reserve, I don't know the exact number, but when they say there's like 10 billion barrels of oil, you're actually only capable of extracting a certain amount of that because the pressure gets so low and it costs too much to pump it up. So you're not actually getting everything in there. So we're looking at 2 to 3 years worth of oil. That is strategic. Here is what I wrote on Twitter. Here is what few people need to understand. Few people seem to understand. People often talk about the strategic oil reserve. Well, at this point in the game, in the world today, all oil in the ground is strategic, especially that which is in a country which has the greatest amount of energy needs and indeed produces the most amount of energy, but they also consume the most, which is why we import it from other countries. At this point in the game, all oil in the ground is strategic. The actual U.S. above ground strategic oil reserve is currently at 1980 levels, okay, when there was 3.5 billion less people in the world. Why am I talking about in the world when we're talking about the U.S. strategic oil reserve? Well, as the dollar is pegged to oil, the U.S. reserve is a global strategic reserve. Some intelligent person, or maybe a dumb one by accident, realized that as expensive as oil is right now, that is buying it from abroad to refill our strategic oil reserve, it's only going to get more expensive in the future, and thus it's cheaper to get oil from abroad now and save the oil in the ground for when shit really hits the fan. Why build all these above ground strategic reservoirs to hold the oil when it's perfectly safe there in the ground? Okay? So Alaska can supply the USA with a couple years of oil at best. So why would they pull it all up just to save a few bucks right now when they're looking at World War III strategically? What are we going to need moving forward now that BRICS controls 80% of the world's oil? Something to think about. What else we got there? Okay, now this is that quote, "If goods don't cross borders, armies will." Which brings me to my next point. U.S. importing more from Mexico than China for the first time since 2003. Look at that sink like a stone. Look at that. That's where we were. If goods don't cross borders, soldiers will. And correlated with this is a decline in China holding U.S. treasuries. I believe it's declined from 1.3 trillion down to less than 900 billion in a very, very small period of time. Well, relatively speaking, okay? We're talking about the span of 10 years, they've already gotten rid of 40%. And so that is almost correlated with this right here. Okay, and probably a reason for that is they need dollars to do the trading and all that stuff. I'm not an expert on that, but the less and less coupling we have with China, the less incentive they have to avoid going to war over Taiwan, as is the case with us. Now, we will only go to war with China over Taiwan if we rely on those semiconductors. If the United States is able to catch up and build a TSMC factory that can provide all the semiconductors that we need, then maybe it will just be like, Taiwan, you can have it, China. It's possible, unless we view it as an unsinkable aircraft carrier because we want to contain China, that whole, militaristic thinking, it's possible. If you haven't seen the video we did with Rafi Farber, he breaks down how gold is the only real form of money. And when the entire system collapses, you're going to be able to buy a house with an ounce of gold, because that's all a house is actually worth. You see, the true value of everything, every monetary system in the world at its crux is gold. Gold is the basis of all finance. But they don't want people to realize the true value of gold. They discourage people from buying it. The price of gold is artificially suppressed, so it creates the appearance that the monetary system is stable. The last thing they want you to do, and this is why, if you go watch that video, I recommend, and I'm not a financial advisor, this is what I'm doing. So scrap that I recommend part. I would put at least 1/30th of my net worth. I will put 1/30th of my net worth, which ain't much, unfortunately. I know a lot of you guys think it is, but we got a lot of bills to pay around here. 1/30th into precious metals. Because if you do the math, if you divide the value of all the assets in the world by how much gold is available, it works out to about $60,000 to $70,000 per ounce of gold, okay? So that means that it's about 30 times, right? So if you have 1/30, if everything collapses, then you still have that gold, which will have the same equivalent value as you did in fiat currency in the bank. And that's the idea anyways, because you have all these derivatives that are built up, and the basis of the whole thing is gold. Actually, I think a better metaphor is not a pyramid, but it's a top. As long as the top is spinning, this thing will stay up. This thing will stay balanced. But as soon as it starts to wobble, that's it. And it happens fast. Go and watch that interview. There's a part 2 coming up. Now look at what's going on with the economy. We are about to get it, boy. People are saying October is when the recession starts. It's going to be a really, really cold October. Percentage change in wheat prices up 29% in the last couple years. Percentage of rent increases up 18% in the last couple years. We got percent change in the price of, is this used cars, I believe, up 40%. Still up 40%. Teslas are down though. And this one here, which one is this here? I can't remember which one this is. This actually might be the one of the, anyways, the price of everything is sky high. Wages have not kept pace with this whole thing. So the house of cards is teetering on the brink of collapse. So just get ready, folks. I've talked long enough. Please go and enjoy your weekend knowing that the world is ending and crashing all around you. Just kidding. It's never the end. Don't do anything stupid. If you're feeling depressed, if you're feeling, like you can't face the future, I would encourage you to stop consuming this content if it's not empowering you. Because I know there's some people out there, I don't want you going out and making any rash decisions. Live your life to the fullest every day. Know that knowledge is power, information is power. And in fact, if you're aware of all this geopolitical stuff, understand that most people aren't. So that gives you an edge in terms of where to place your bets from an economic standpoint. So you can position yourself for the crash. There's a lot of people, and I'm not an economist, I'm not one of these channels who's that optimistic to be giving people financial advice about how to benefit from the collapse of everything, whether it's in a economic form or a World War III form. Sounds crazy. I don't think there's a lot of ways that anybody's going to benefit from a World War III situation, but maybe from like a depressionary situation, there are ways that you can leverage that situation to your advantage if you are prepared for it, if you position yourself for it. If you can be ahead of the information curve, then there's no reason why you shouldn't be a few standard deviations ahead of everybody else when the smoke clears, all right? So stay optimistic, my friends, stay strong, use preparedness and an awareness of all of this stuff to motivate you to get ready. Just get ready. Even the Saudis are doing gold now. Saudis gold reserve, a new strategy. They call it a strategy. Yeah, it's a strategy, all right. They've convinced people that gold is not it's incredible to me. They've convinced people that the foundation of the system doesn't exist. That, you don't need that stuff. Well, why is it the most heavily guarded, coveted stuff in the earth? Well, come to your own conclusions about that. Get your gear while you can. Price is rising on this stuff, and the deal is almost up for that stuff. Thanks for watching, guys. Canadian Prepper out.